Don't you love these pictures? All these pictures are now on a slideshow on TMZ.com. Amanda, please, I beg you not to show the picture of Larry Stern and I dancing to Earth, Wind, and Fire. Please. I will pay you. So, anyways, this next general session I think you'll all find quite interesting. And it's called Building a Cross-Generational Workplace. And I'll tell you a quick little story about how this session came about. In fact, I was talking to Sammer the Hammer from Cooper last night, and he had told me he used to be with Capgemini. So anybody who did a lot of consulting or worked on projects or just generally travels on a regular basis, staying in the same hotel will know what I'm talking about. Well, as everybody knows, IDEA's headquarters is in Crystal City in Arlington, Virginia, and I live in Rhode Island. So I frequently go down to bother Bob Gaylord and to disrupt the staff, and I stay at the Hilton. And anybody who's visited the offices down there knows that the Hilton's right across the street. So I'm there so frequently when I do check in, they say, "Welcome home, Mr. Horton." And I have the cell phone numbers of all the staff, etc. So about 18 months ago, I'm in there, and I meet this gentleman from IBM. And he's there every week. He lives in Denver. He does one of those Sunday to Thursday gigs. I think he was working down at the the Naval Yard there on a project, and a consulting project. So every time I go down there, I'd see Dennis. And we sit and we watch a ball game, and we do this and do that. And so we were talking one day, and in fact, he got to meet some of the staff and, from different events we had over there. And so we were talking about our eBiz forum and talking about certain things that we wanted to talk about. And this next subject, it was right up his alley, his expertise. So we got Dennis. And the best part about it is he's a keynote speaker, and we don't have to pay him. So anyway, Dennis is a senior management consultant with IBM Human Capital Management Consulting. He's been there for 25 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Dennis Griess.
Am I on? I guess I am. Thanks. Thank you, Steve. Whoa. Where's the spot I'm not supposed to stand? Is it just keep walking and talking and you'll get used to me? Okay, good. A couple things about my style and two corrections. I've been with IBM for almost 28 years, and my last name is pronounced Griess, like the country. Thanks for asking before you mispronounced it, though. It was a valiant effort. You did ask. You absolutely did. It was a good story, yeah. So, fairy tales start once upon a time, unless Horton's involved in it, it started in a bar. So I really got a kick out of getting to know Steve. A couple things I want to do before we get too far into the process, and I'll bring up the panel in a few minutes. I do have some prepared remarks, but before I get into that, I'd like to get a feel for the room. This is hopefully more conversational than some of the panels that you've sat in, and those lights are going to kill me when I start asking questions and I have to raise your hands, but we'll make it do. So you can ask a question of me anytime if I see you. If I don't see you, holler. And we'll recognize you and we'll take up your question. And when the panel comes up here, I've cleared it with them. I'm not going to sit and just read questions and have them respond. I will tee some stuff up and get it started, but if you have a question you want to ask it. We'll get it in there, because this is going to be a lot more valuable for you if we're answering the questions you're holding in your mind. First question, how many out here that are here are considered senior leaders in your company or enterprise? Okay, I'm looking at about 25%. Good. How many of you have been in the industry for more than 5 years? Okay, that's a lot. Probably 90%. How about more than 10? It's most of the same ones. 15? Wow. 20? Okay, we're finally getting a break point. 30? Okay, I've got a few. All right, and more than 40? Just thought I'd ask. Okay. There's some things you guys make notes of this. Make a note of this. I think this is important. How many of you expect that you're going to be in the role that you're in 10 years? A handful. I'll say 10%. And make a note of that. How many of you, for how many of you is this your first IDEA conference? Okay, good number, maybe 20%. How many of you have been to 10 or more? Okay, we've got a few of those too. So these conferences are an interesting thing, and I had a great conversation last night with some folks that I consider to be on the younger end of the spectrum, which was very, very interesting. Now the next question, and I know this is going to be a small one. How many of you have been with your firm for less than 10 years? Okay, a relatively small number. And now how many of you have been out of college less than 10 years? Got 1, 2, 3, about 5, 7. Okay, so those of you who are looking at those demographics, we've got a huge gap between those younger people and those people with a lot more experience. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. How do we address those? Now, just for interest, on a technology point, how many of you, when you came to this conference, brought with you a computer of some sort? Okay, 10 years ago, that would not have been the case. Almost everybody brought a laptop. And then the next question, how many of you brought with you a smartphone? It's like everybody's crossed that chasm now. And I'll be generous and call a BlackBerry a smartphone. And how many of you use your phone primarily for making and taking phone calls? Okay, that's interesting. I would have expected that number to be a lot higher. So somewhere along the lines, we're starting to cross the line of smartphones actually give us things to do besides being phones. What they're becoming is, universal handheld data access devices. Pretty important for what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And then the last question on the technology front, how many of you have Twitter accounts? A pretty decent number, it's about 25%. And how many of you are using social media in one way or another in your business? A few more. Okay, that's great. Excellent. So we're going to bring up the panel in just a couple minutes, but I'd like to share with you a couple thoughts before we do that. This is the situation that we're looking at today. And you saw as we looked at the raising of the hands that there's a decided weighting in this group on this side of the equation. The people who are, and I'll use my generation gently, when we entered the workforce, every manager in every company had a secretary, and every secretary had a Selectric typewriter. And communications were done with brown envelopes that had boxes on them, and you had routing slips, and that's how communication was done. The secretary typed it up. She grabbed the routing slip for your department. She'd check off your name, put the thing in the envelope, stick it in the mailbox, and it went from you to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, and that's how we did communication way back when. That's a different world than the people who've come in the middle. The people who come into this world, people who came out of college in the 80s and 90s, in 1980, the PC became something that was available. Now, they weren't everywhere. Every business didn't have them for every employee. But by the time you get to the people who are now 35 years old coming into this world, we all had email. We all now have email accounts. Those people got email accounts when they started with the company. When I started working, getting an email account, we had a business justification to get an email account. Not anymore. And the people who were born after 80 who are coming into the workplace, these people, by the way, if you're 35 years old, when you started with your company, the internet didn't exist yet. Outside of the government space, the military. So that's a huge change. And these people, to them, smartphones, all these other things, they're just another way to get to all the information that we used to have to go to somebody who knew to get stuff done. So the world's changed quite a lot. And by the way, this is only representing 3 generations. I've got another chart that represents 4. I was reading an article yesterday about what they're now calling Generation Z. which are the people who were born after 1990, who are going to be entering the workforce in the next couple of years, and what's their world going to be like, and how different is that, and what it's going to take to bring them in to make them effective. So think of a number. Back when I first started using a telephone, you could actually dial 4 or 5 digits and get the person you wanted to. But you dial it. Now you can't call anybody with less than 10. And you don't do it this way anymore. You do it this way. You punch it. I remember in 1964 going to the New York World's Fair in Flushing Meadows. AT&T had a booth, and they had they were just rolling out the concept of touch-tone phones, and they had this light thing that would count how much time it took for you to dial a phone, and you dial your phone number on the rotary phone, and then you dial your phone number on the touch-tone phone, and it would go from like 30 seconds down to 3 seconds, and that was like, ooh, wow. But justifying the way that gets done. Now, we don't use, nobody has a desk phone with just 12 buttons on it anymore. At least not very many. Most of us, if you're going to reach us, you're going to do it on your cellular phone. And what's wrong with Mr. Smiley? Why is he confused? Well, 2 things. One, if you notice closely, he has 2 left hands. But Mr. Smiley is confused because Mr. Smiley does not know whether to push the buttons on his phone with his index finger, like an old person, or to push the buttons on his phone with his thumbs, like a younger person. That's why Mr. Smiley is confused. This is the world we're dealing with. We've got this huge chasm. People are used to doing things in different ways. I bet you of those of you who brought smartphones and laptops, I didn't ask the question, how many of you are more comfortable entering information on your phone than on your laptop? Of this audience, I would bet most of you would prefer to be typing it. Even if you are only 2-finger or 4-finger typists, you probably prefer to be working on that big keyboard. Well, or maybe when you started, you'd rather be on your grandpa box. But the tools are only a symptom. They're not the whole issue. There's a lot more into what's going on. If you think about it, this is what one executive shared with us about what he's seeing in his enterprise. There are people that he's got, and he knows he's got them. They're about to leave. They're about to leave the company for one reason or another. They may be 70 years old, 60. They may be 50 years old. But they've been around the block, and they're about to retire. And when they retire, down goes the information. That information is lost to the enterprise indefinitely, maybe permanently. And he's been filling up his pipeline of employees trying to get work done, trying to grow his business. Maybe he's being aware, maybe he's just doing what he has to do with these new recruits out of college. And he's got this chasm in the middle that he's trying to figure out how to fill. What's in that chasm? He said he has a knowledge sharing gap. What is it? What could it possibly be that the old folks knew that the young folks don't know? Really, what could a person who's been around for 25 years in the company know that a young person doesn't know or couldn't know? Anything?
Company culture.
The culture, absolutely. Anything else?
How things work instead of that they just work.
How things work. Yeah, and I'll offer another one because somebody's not going to say it. They know where the bones are. They know where the skeletons are. They know where things are buried. And remember, those guys who started off when they had those brown envelopes where things got routed around, they had documents, lots of documents. I guarantee you that 90+% of those documents from 30 years ago, they either know the stuff cold and don't need to look it up. They do know that. Most of them do. The good ones do. The ones are still around. The other thing is that information did not get digitized. It is not existing in an electronic form, and if it is, it's scanned someplace and nobody knows where it is. So it's a different way of, it's a different set of knowing. Now your new guys coming in, if they need a specific piece of information, they know where to find it. They can go to Google. They can go to your internal Google. They can go to your internal search engines. They can find the data. That's all great. What's hard for the young people to understand is how the old people worked. When I started, I worked in the sales organization in IBM years and years and years ago. There were some guys who you could just, they just knew how to get along with people. Meaning knew how to get along. They would walk in and you'd see them start interacting. Hi, how you doing? How's your wife? Your son just had his birthday. How's he doing in college? How's his soccer team doing? Blah, blah, blah. They knew everything about the people they were working with. That information is not captured anywhere either. Now a young person will go, what the heck? I went on his Facebook page. I knew all that stuff. This isn't magic. That guy doesn't think I care about him any more than I care about the next person. I could find everything I wanted to about that person. There's a mythology about the way people work and the way people get things done that contributes to why the knowledge gap exists. The behaviors are challenging. The behaviors and getting the different behaviors out of people makes it challenging. I'm not going to read all these to you because I'm sure that Amanda's going to make this available for all of you. Thank you. And you can grab it down off a SlideShare. But there are differences, and I said, the traditionalists, these would be the people that are before my generation, whatever that would be. I happen to be a baby boomer. I'm smack dab in the middle of the baby boom. But there are different behaviors for the way that they like to take training, the way they like to learn, the way that they communicate. And this collaborative one is a huge deal. They don't always like to be told what to do, but they don't mind having a conversation about how to get things done. The way that they lead, the command and control top-down stuff doesn't quite work as well for them. Some of them in the military are still wrestling with how to make that work. How do they get feedback? How do they get rated? And then, what's their thought about changing a job? Would I want to change a job? Do I want to get good at a thing and do that thing for a whole career? Do I just want to get into a company and do I want to explore every part of that company for an entire career? Or do I just want to satisfy myself taking whatever jobs are necessary along the way? And there's a notion that young people, the youngest ones out there, don't care because companies don't care for us, we don't care for the company, and we'll do whatever we need to do to enjoy our lives and get what we want out of it. So there's this horrible caricature that the older generation knows how to work. They go to work, they work hard, they do their work, and when they go home, they know how to be at home, and they know how to be family people, and they know how to do all that stuff. And the younger people don't. They just are confused. They don't know when to work, when not to work. They've got that thing strapped on their hip, and you don't know whether they're on that thing and they're doing work or whether they're playing. And when they're away from work, you don't know whether they're playing or whether they're at work. They just have this really weird clock, and they're just tired all the time, and they just don't care. That's a caricature. That is not a true picture, and we'll talk more about that with Becky, Erin, and Barry in a few minutes. And there are contrarian studies that are out there. There are some that say, look, it's a stereotype. The data doesn't support it. There are a lot of millennials that are extremely satisfied with their work. There are a lot of them who are coming into companies and saying, this company is good for me, and I enjoy this company, and I can see myself there for a good long time. There's room for me to grow. There's room for me to spread my wings. There's room for me to share my expertise. And when you get down to satisfaction, they're as or more satisfied with their opportunities than the baby boomers and the other older young folks that are in the organizations. So there's all of this noise going around in the enterprise. There are 7 challenges that we have to look at, and this is all sort of from an HR, but it's a personnel, it's a workplace concern, starting at the top and working around counterclockwise, figuring out what it is you want to do and what you're going to need to make that work. That's critical. Do you need to hire more engineers? Do you need to hire people who are more sales-oriented? Do you need to hire people who know how to gauge in markets? Then understanding, what do you have? What are the demographics and capabilities that you have in your workforce today? Is it the workforce you need to do what you want to do? Then looking at performance and feedback, helping to grow people to where you want them to be, developing the skills within the organization, and then this is where the work starts getting hard. Facilitating the collaboration across the organization, breaking down those silos between engineering and sales, between sales and support, and getting that feedback loop going effectively. Enabling individuals to work regardless of location. This is critical, and it's not just an age thing. As you start to look at your people in a mobile workforce, you may not have as many people reporting to work at the location now as you did in the past. By the way, it starts to reduce real estate costs. It becomes beneficial. But you may also need to look at notions like that to deal with when you've got those people that are aging out of your organization. Do you want to let that knowledge go? Or do you want to provide some ways to capitalize on that knowledge and provide flexible ways for them to engage? So you may be using the same strategies for dealing with your folks that are moving out of the organization on the top as you might be using to attract and draw in new people coming in from the bottom. And then using the social networks to increase the visibility and application of knowledge across the organization. This is exactly what Tim was talking about this morning. Set your data free, and then in your organization and in your ecosystem, have those conversations that need to be had to drive the insights, to drive the results that you want to get to. So these are the strategies we're going to want to talk about. And now I'm just going to take that off because you guys don't want to look at the questions I might have thought about. We're going to bring up our panel.